Today I'm interviewing my grandmother, Clemmy Coleman. Okay, so my first question is, what city were you born in and raised in, and how was your life during the 60s?
I was born in a little place called Inverness, Alabama, right out of Union Springs, not far from Tuskegee. And I had a good life. I was comfortable. I had I lived with my mother, and then I lived with my grandma, and we had a real good life, real good life. We never had to deal with the white man.
Okay, my second question is,
Loud, Bree.
what was the racial climate during the Civil Rights era in the city you were in?
What was the what?
What was the racial climate during the Civil Rights era in the city you were in?
Well, they had the segregation because the blacks and the whites went to different schools, and whenever we would go to different restaurants, we had to go into the back. Also, whenever we would ride buses, we would have to sit in the back.
Okay. My third question is, have you ever been in a segregated town? If so, what was your experience?
Yes, I've lived in a segregated town. My experience was okay because I knew my place. I knew what I was supposed to do, and I did just that. Because I knew time would eventually get better.
Okay. My fourth question is, where were you when MLK was shot and killed? Describe how it felt.
I was living here in Detroit, and I was very, very upset, and I was very sad. Because I felt like he lost his life for doing things to protect his people.
What was your experience like traveling down south? Were you ever in fear of stopping at certain rest stops or gas stations?
Sometimes the experience could be stressful because there were certain rest stops and gas stations and whatnot. I still say we had to go on the outside and then back to the toilets and the restaurants. We had a certain place to sit. So most of the time we would pack our foods in the car. We only had to stop for gas in the restroom.
Who did you like most, Malcolm X or MLK, and why?
I like both of them about the same, but there was something about Martin Luther King I liked because he really did a lot of sacrificing for his people.
Okay. Do you think Malcolm X's separatism strategy would have worked better than integration of black people socially and economically?
Um, yes.
My next question is, do you know anyone involved in any of King's marches, Montgomery bus boycott, Nation of Islam, Black Panther, or SNCC?
Yes, my grandma and my uncle was involved in the marches in Montgomery with Martin Luther King.
Okay. Which assassination affected you the most? Martin Luther King, JF Kennedy, or X, and why?
Martin Luther King, because I felt like Martin Luther King lost his life for his people. Well, all of them affected me, but Martin Luther King the most.
When the Civil Rights Act was passed, were you satisfied with racial progress in America?
Read that again.
When the Civil Rights Act was passed, were you satisfied with racial progress in America?
Yes.
Do you wish you could go back and do something different to change the situation? Why or why not?
I'm pretty much satisfied. There's a lot of work we still have to do, and there are a lot of problems we have to solve. But right at this time, I'm pretty much satisfied.
Okay. Um, who did you prefer most, Malcolm X or MLK, and why?
Just like I said before, I like both of them, but I would prefer Martin Luther King. It's because that he did a lot, and he put his life on the line and his family to make things better for us.
What do you feel was the biggest issue during the civil rights era, and why?
The segregation and black people getting their rights and treated equally.
Okay. Do you think things have changed or gotten better after the Civil Rights Act was passed?
They have gotten better, but there's still a lot of work that has to be done.
What do you feel was the main issue was, and why?
Read that again.
What do you feel the main issue was during that time, and why?
I think the main issue was the white people wanted to keep the black people underfoot. They did not want the black people to be treated equally or have the same privileges that they had.
Okay. Looking back, how do you feel about it now?
I have mixed emotions because in the South, you know where you stand with the white people, and they are honest with you. But here, on the north side of the Mason-Dixon line, we still have a lot of work to do. The white people might think that you are treated equally, but you are not. But you are not.
And if you could change one thing to make it your way, what would you change?
Treat everybody equally.
And how do you feel about Malcolm X and MLK, and what do you feel the biggest difference was?
Well, Martin Luther King was for the people in general, but Malcolm X, I don't know it for a fact, but I've always, Martin Luther King was not for violence, but I've always been told that the Muslims was for violence.
And my last question for today is, what was your reaction to Malcolm X and Martin Luther King's death? And how do you feel about both?
I was very sad. I was very sad because I don't think anyone should be killed. But I was very sad for both of them.
Okay, that's the end of our interview. Thank you for your time.
Dennis, come here, Bree.